Hello and welcome to this 14th edition of the Echo Chamberlain livestream. I don't actually remember the first edition because it took place 40 years before I was born. I don't quite understand how the lore works. It's all very confusing. But anyway, let's bring on the guests. My first guest, as a scrupulously decent independent, has been chosen to host the upcoming United States presidential debate. But will he be impartial? Will he resist the temptation to make the questions Illinois-centric? And has he had sufficient training to be able to power up, yell clear, and activate the defibrillator device on hand should one of the two elderly participants go into cardiac arrest during proceedings? To tease us with a few hints of what to expect is, if I can find him, Mr. Greg Owen.
Here I am. Thank you for having me on once again. If you ever don't have me on, I think I'm going to make a music video probably within 72 hours, probably something black and white. And I'm going to I've got some pretty seriously punishing rhymes that I'm going to make up to let you know who's the boss. Yes, Thursday night we have our double octogenarian presidential debate, and it's going to be a thriller. I'll tell you what.
Well, I think the whole internet wants to see you squeeze your way into some tight jean shorts and then go by an urban landscape and then drop some sick truth about stuff.
I'm pretty sure if I attempted to twerk, I would fall over. And
yeah. Well, it's good to have you back on again. Now, there has been such a saturation of LGBT-themed entertainment of late that at this point, we might as well just go with the flow and try and get into the spirit of it. So my next guest has a top bearish masculinity, but despite his exertions, his complexion maintains a natural, dewy, and youthful radiance. So my question to him is the question on everyone's lips. Despot of Antrim, what's your secret?
Just relax and try to stay pretty. That's all there is to it. Greg, I've two questions regarding Illinois. One, was John Wayne Gacy from Illinois?
I don't honestly know. I think that sounds familiar. Maybe
Gacy. Because he's on the Sufjan Stevens album, Illinois. Oh. Because Sufjan Stevens had this idea when he was just starting his career that he was going to write an album for every US state. And I think he did a couple of them, and Illinois was the last one he did before he abandoned the idea. And there's a song about John Wayne. Either is it Gacy or Gacy? I don't know. Anyway, but the second question, would you object to John Wayne Gacy running for president?
Well,
he was around today.
Since pretty much everybody that we've been running and electing are clowns, yeah, I think that he would fit right in. It wouldn't be a problem at all. Turns out he did live near Chicago, Illinois. By God, learned something new today.
Yeah.
Well, it's great
to have really cannibalize the national debt.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry, no, I'm gonna come
that could be his campaign slogan.
Yeah. We're gonna strip public services to the bone. Anyway, on to our last guest.
We're gonna cut down the public services.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, hot dog eating champion Joey Chestnut will not be competing at this year's world famous 4th of July contest over a contract dispute regarding vegan sausages. This has left the door wide open for my next guest to finally rise to the top. But will he be able to smash the record of 76 hot dogs, or will he convulsively projectile vomit and cause a total barfarama like in the film Stand By Me? To answer this is DarkHour.
I'm not the biggest fan of hot dogs, so probably the latter. More of a burger guy myself.
Well, it's good to have.
It's Gacy, by the way.
It's Gacy.
Yeah, the Gracies are the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu family.
Okay, I think it's Gacy.
That's a deep cut. All right, well, so it's good to have you all on because it's been quite a busy week of news and the usual crap. So I guess with no further ado, we'll get straight onto it. All right. Well, I tried to find some bad takes, but there weren't enough this time. So we're just going to shuttle straight into this. For all the people who keep pestering me about a return to the culture war, it will come around. I just never get around to doing the questions, but it will return. Here we go. So the big news is Inside Out 2, which is from Pixar and has smashed records. It's astonishing how it's doing. So I'll just read you some of the stuff that's been going on here. It is tracking $70 million ahead of Frozen 2, 14th biggest Pixar release of all time in just 10 days of release, adjusted for inflation. Worldwide, already top 10 for Pixar after just 10 days, halfway to $1.5 billion. And it's going to surpass Incredibles 2 as the biggest Pixar release of all time. So at a cost of $200 million, and we'll say like an extra $150 million for promotion and distribution, it's already broken even, which means every dollar from now on is pure profit, which would be in the hundreds of millions from merchandising and streaming. So it's kind of cool that Pixar, which was kind of a bit iffy over the last year or two, is suddenly surging back. And we like to see success. We celebrate success. We don't like Disney, but we don't really have too much of a beef with Pixar. And this is smashing all records, which is bringing people back into the theaters, families back into the theaters, kids connecting with and enjoying the cinematic experience. And it may not be new, it's kind of a retread, but it's just got that magic, that special sauce, which is working.
Yeah.
So look at that, $100 million already, and then total of 355 million worldwide. It's bananas.
That was week one. I think right now it's well over 700 million.
Oh yeah, that's right. So this is the week 2 findings. So in the second week, it's got 100 million. People were speculating that in its first week it might make 90 million, maybe to 100 million. So a second week.
That's domestic, by the way. That's 100 million domestic. Yeah. Internationally, this thing is massive. Yeah. It's huge everywhere, and it's rare that a movie will be really huge internationally and domestic. That's one of the reasons Hollywood liked superhero movies so much, because they did really well both domestically and internationally. Mm-hmm. But Inside Out 2 has been a smash hit everywhere.
Yeah, well, and it's just an excellent movie. Like, I went and saw it. I don't know if you guys have been to see it. It's just great. It is. You mentioned that it's not like it's kind of a retread, but I think that Inside Out wasn't broken, and they didn't decide they wanted to fix it. And I think that's a really good call. Let's not take a completely brand new crazy direction. Let's just kind of build on what we already did, and it works. It's a very, very good movie. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I agree. I think it's a terrific movie. And there are specific things I can point to say, okay, that's excellent. So, for example, Maya Hawke plays Anxiety. Anxiety is the little orange character, and she's brilliant. Yeah. She's absolutely brilliant in it. And the character design, the new character designs are superb. There's a character called Nostalgia, which I think is a kind of, I think, and I'd like to get Greg's opinion on this. I think Nostalgia is, it's Pixar being, it's kind of meta, but it's meta done well. It's Pixar saying, we know that there's been too much nostalgia baiting in movies over the past few years, and we know that, and we're not going to be doing that in this, but we are just going to be making a good movie, which is why they bring Nostalgia out. Nostalgia is this little old lady character, and she comes out and she says something like, "Oh, I remember when we were 9 years old and we had friends," and the characters literally come over and push her back into the closet and say, no, go away, you're not supposed to come out yet. And I think that's them being meta and aware and saying, okay, yeah, we get it, there's been too much nostalgia in movies, we want to do something new, but without key jangling. Did you get that impression, Greg?
You know, I didn't even think it that far through, but now that you say it, it does make perfect sense. It is kind of it's a nice signal that, yeah, we're doing something, we're doing a sequel, but we're not doing it lazily, which it wasn't. It wasn't lazy at all. They really took their time with it. Like you said, I think the character designs were great. I think the way they were used, everything except for Envy, which was kind of a wasted character, didn't really, just kind of there to, I don't know, just that I think they felt like, only 3 is not enough. So we got to have a 4th one and don't have much for them to do. But no, I thought the nostalgia joke was funny, and I think you're on with that, because it wasn't, hey, remember when we were great? It was, here's another great movie, and that's a huge difference that we're not seeing from Disney right now. So I was happy to see it.
Yeah, there was also another little moment I liked. The character Ennui, which is in the top left corner there, that purple character.
That's great.
Ennui just lounges around the entire movie, and he's on his phone the whole time, and he's lazy, and he barely looks around. The one time he gets energetic and does anything is when he loses his phone, and he just completely loses his shit. That's Pixar kind of making fun of teenagers who just, as long as they're on the phone, they don't care. But the second they lose their phone, their whole world implodes. That was nice. That was a nice little touch. And there's lots of those nice little touches. The third act, astonishingly, because you know how a lot of movies fall apart in the third act, that it didn't. It actually got better. The third act was terrific.
Yeah, the way that they portray anxiety, I thought was really it was excellent, because oftentimes, well, first of all, it's kind of trendy to have anxiety or a lot of different things right now. So they could have gone that way with it, like, oh, anxiety is cool, or they could have gone the other way with it, like anxiety is terrible and like you got to kick it out. And they found this really great balance where they introduced anxiety as kind of a good thing, because anxiety is like, I plan for the future, that's my job, and sort of gets the character Riley out of a bad situation, because it's like, hey, I've kind of analyzed how this could go wrong, and I'm going to avoid those things, and it goes really well. And then as the movie progresses, anxiety takes over more and makes more plans, and they're wilder, crazier plans, and that's how it gets out of control. And the movie does a great job of portraying anxiety not as something evil that you should avoid, but something that can get out of hand, because you can just start making up scenarios for yourself that you then worry about that are not realistic in any way. And that's kind of how the movie comes to a head, is Riley has this full-on anxiety attack, and the way they show that happening through the emotions it's fantastic. I mean, they nailed it.
That's great. It cost $200 million, which strikes me as extraordinary for a digital, I guess, what do you call it? A digital cartoon release? Can you see the budget on screen? That's an astonishing amount of money. It does
look really good. Something that was cool about Inside Out was, if you look at it real closely, all the characters are made up of little specks, little motes. They're not solid. And when they zoom in on them, you can see that they're made of they're like a pointillism, little Monet paintings. And in this one, it was even more crisp. And in a lot of the shots, you could really see, and all the little atoms that they're made of are constantly moving and shifting, and they really sharpen that up. And I think some of it also just had to do with the fact that this was like 7 years in development. So I think some of it was just, it may have been in development hell for a little while, which usually signals a terrible product. But this one made it out, but just cost a little bit.
So the kids who watched the first one, most of them would have aged out by now and become teenagers, to which it wouldn't appeal. So this is essentially, in a way, kind of starting from scratch with a whole new generation. And I really like the idea that if you're a kid or a pubescent, you're just sort of coming to terms with the idea that other people's internal lives are just as rich and complex as yours. And it's a very difficult concept to get your head around, because you like to think that you're special and amazing. And then if you have to concede the idea that everyone else's internal world is just as rich as yours, then you feel that you might drown in an irrelevance, that you're just part of a generality, which is a difficult concept to wrestle with. So here, I mean, it must be amazing if you're a kid to see different shades or gradations of feelings manifested on the screen. I can see how that would be extremely absorbing and gripping, because you're reveling in the entertainment of it, but you're also at a more meta or abstract level exploring these ideas that, I can be part of the commonality, but I can also still have a rich world at the same time. And to have animators and story writers taking you through that process, I think is quite sweet, and I can see how that would definitely appeal.
Yeah, and there's a lot of places they can go with this. For example, if they do want to go into the future and make it, to age it up a little bit, they could introduce love and hate, for example, both of which are perfectly natural emotions. There's nothing wrong with feeling hatred, despite what the Scottish government thinks. And of course, love. It'd be interesting to see how they would do that in the future. So it definitely has places this can go as a franchise. Interesting new places, like, well, the little girl, I think in this she's like 12 or 13. When she turns 16, then she gets much more adult sexual feelings and emotions and things like that. That'd certainly be interesting to look at if they age it up a bit, or they could just stick with the current sort of young teen audience plus mom and dad, general family. It's interesting, but yeah, they've done a great job to really revive this franchise. And another thing I love about it is that it really highlights the failures of Lucasfilm right now, because here's Pixar coming out with this smash hit, And then what is supposed to be another major studio at Disney, Lucasfilm, are now on their 9th flop in a row. 10th, if you count the Star Cringer Hotel.
Yeah.
It really has, you know, the absolute discrete difference now between Lucasfilm and then Marvel sort of clambering back up with, you know, what is it? The Something Part 3 with Wolverine. Yeah, that one.
Deadpool,
So they're clambering back up, and then Pixar smashing it out of the park. So it's just Lucasfilm. So I don't know what bye go. Like if you're staring at a whiteboard, you're not breaking the Enigma code. You've got Kathleen Kennedy written in one side, and you've got Lucasfilm and all the money in the thing. It's not that difficult.
I spent all of yesterday thinking about this, and I came up with a really novel solution for what might solve Lucasfilm's problems. I think, and just hear me out. I think they should fire Kathleen Kennedy.
I'm thinking that could be true.
It could work.
I'm thinking we could sneak into Lucasfilm, pretending to be a rat catcher, and then find a win. But
and behead somebody that isn't Kathleen Kennedy, apparently.
What?
That's
you said it, not me. Yeah, we accidentally do Dave Filoni instead by mistake.
I think the only way
any head will do.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty tall guy, so I'll wear a trench coat, and one of you can kind of crawl in under my trench coat, and that's a pretty foolproof way to get anywhere. So I think we'll be fine.
Oh boy. Yeah, so here's second week grosses. Look at this. Oh, this is from Dan Murrell, by the way. I literally just swiped it. So second week grosses, bigger than Barbie's second week, bigger than the Super Mario Brothers second week, bigger than Top Gun Maverick second week, and bigger than Spider-Man No Way Home's second week. This is gigantic. This is as big as it gets. I mean, that's astonishing stuff.
My research said that only 6 other movies have ever made more than that on their second weekend.
Crazy stuff.
I'm
just trying to think what would the characters, the figurative meta characters, be in my brain? You'd have neuroses, malaise, despair, incredulity. It'd be horrible. Who would be in your head, Greg, if you had these?
Is puns an emotion, or is that because I've got that bouncing around?
That's a little side. That's an ancillary character who comes in every once in a while.
Humor, dad humor. The really, really terrible kind.
Cynicism.
Cynicism would be in there.
Cynicism would be a good one.
Shame, I think I would definitely have that. Would be in there. He'd be a huge character. He'd be like a vast lumbering thing that comes in and out. But yeah, so well done to Pixar. I'm very glad that they're making some good money, and all those hardworking people put their love into it. There was no identity politics, obviously.
Yeah. Historically, when Pixar's doing well, it's a good sign. So.
Yeah, they seem like they're getting back to. I know a lot of people are worried that like it's the sequel that made it, and then they're going to learn the lesson of we'll just make more sequels, because they are working on Toy Story 5 right now. But recently, Pete Docter, their creative director, chief creative guy, whatever, he kind of came out and sort of admitted in an interview with Time that the last couple of movies we did, Elemental, Turning Red, Luca, these were very much based on like personal experiences that each director had. I know Elemental specifically, I read interviews with the director that basically he was like, yeah, this was a love letter to my immigrant parents. This is about immigration. This is about my experience, growing up with immigrants. And Pete Docter was like, yeah, we're going to kind of move away from that back to these more universal themes. And I think the entire audience was like, oh yeah, no shit. That's what you're going to go with. That's crazy that it wasn't working before, that, if you don't have an overbearing Asian mother, you can't enjoy Turning Red. So yeah, maybe you should get back to what works. If they go back to sequels, but it kind of gets them back on their feet and gets back to the fundamentals, I think I could tolerate a couple of sequels for a couple of years if that's what's going to help.
I was going to say something similar. And also Pixar is kind of unique in this sense where I feel like a lot of people will attach to specific stories, like Toy Story as probably the biggest example, but it seems like you get like one or two per person where they're like, oh, I really like this one, I really like this one, and they'll just follow it through. And that could be the case with Inside Out. I mean, like you said, Toy Story 5 will come out. That'll make a crap ton of money just because it's Toy Story 5, and there's going to be... So there's definitely an emotional investment in Pixar films a little bit more, than it seems with a lot of other studios.
Yeah.
Yeah, this just seems to have a ton of heart to it. which is great. Whereas those other things, plus you couldn't elevator pitch those other ones, like Seeing Red or Wish or Luca. Like, what is it? I don't know what it is, but this, you get the gist straight away. It's enticing and alluring.
Unfortunately, next year, their next original thing is Elio. I don't know if you guys have seen.
Oh, yeah. That looks like a train wreck.
It does not look great, and that's their next one. And I think that's going to kill kind of some of this. Like, they're like, yeah, Pixar's back, and that's going to come out next year. And people are like, oh, wait, they're not all the way back.
Elio has been around for a while, and what Bob Iger did is discreetly, he could see it was a train wreck. So when he was going through that big battle with that other dude for shares and things, they just shunted that so it would be after that, so it wouldn't be a big headache leading up to that. But now they've got to deal with it. It's a kid who has like some sort of an eye patch because he has some condition of some kind of thing.
Man, it sounds like... Go ahead, Echo, sorry.
Oh, and he has to struggle not only with that, which actually has nothing to do with anything. It's got nothing to do with the rest of the story. It's just in there because it's to do with empowerment and sensitivity and empathy.
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with having that, but I think if you're going to do that sort of super niche thing, maybe just have it as an obscure passing character in a scene, and you can sort of deal with the idea of how a handicapped kid might interact with his peer group in one scene and then move on. And I think that's fine. But if you're going to make that an entire movie, fair enough, but it's going to have to be an indie movie with a very small budget because it's so niche.
I'm a little concerned.
So contextless.
I don't even know what that movie's about yet, and I'm not sure that the trailers have even tried to hint that. But I'm worried that it's going to be like a this kid is. I think he's mistaken for the King of Earth or something by these aliens, and I'm worried that they're going to go with like they're going to show him how terrible the human race is, and it's going to be people are all terrible and we all need to get along better. Earth is being condemned by these aliens or something because they're superior to us, they're more progressive. Or I'm afraid that's where they're going to go with this. So I don't know. We'll need to see more trailers, but you're right. The Iger delay means he knows something we don't, and it's probably not amazing.
Well, we do know because I've seen the trailer, and I trust my instincts after 2 or 3 years of wading through a cesspool of entertainment. I can see stuff coming a long way away. So, yeah, I just see something and I know now. That's basically where. God damn it. Anyway, the Discourse. So I did like my last video. I started off with like this cycle that I identified. So The Last Jedi, it's crap low quality entertainment. It divides the fan base. It's imbued with disproportionate identity politics. And then the critics and the deadline style media will just ignore the vast generalities, irked annoyance, and just focus on a tiny amount of literal haters and psychopaths. And then you'll have the one major figure who becomes the emotional button-pushing center of it all, in Kelly Tran, I think it was. And then you go through Kenobi and you do the exact same cycle all over again, except you just substitute in Moses Ingram, and then you have what's-his-face doing his contemptuous critique of the toxic fans. And then you do the exact same cycle again with the low quality, the corporatized stuff, the overindulgent imbuing of identity politics, the disgruntled fan base ignored by the media, who then focus on a tiny amount of toxic fans. And then you get like the figure who becomes the emotional button-pushing center of it all, and Amanda Stenberg, who claps back at criticism. The same cycle all over again. And it's the quality, dummy. If the quality of the show was good, none of this would be happening. Yeah. But they have these terrible blind spots in the media, and it's fascinating to me. They're more blind spot than actual ability to see. So in the media, they never talk about the ratings being absolutely terrible for these shows and movies. The fact that this show had 3 million less views than Ahsoka, which had less views than the other preceding ones, doesn't get a mention. The fact that the quality is poor, the quality of the writing of the show, the quality of the dialogue, the quality of the sets, the quality of the lighting, the quality of the pacing, it's all poor. The absolute, they have no conception that you could have identity, but the idea that you could have an overindulgence in identity doesn't register with them. It's not something that's a concept. And then the slapback. So to drop a music video, the empowerment, the sassy reclaiming of the narrative, becomes in and of itself, therefore it's of quality. So the fact that it's a mumbled rap song with no particular rhyming skills, no particular good dancing or singing, and the backing track is rubbish. So the idea of quality just doesn't figure into into the discourse in the media at all. It's just the fact that if it's empowering, it's therefore of quality.
Well, they know it's not great. Like what I'm loving is I was watching a guy, there's another YouTuber, Ruined Leon, and he was covering some of this. And I've also read some of the articles, and like all these people are like, the fans are racist, the fans are sexist, you know, it's review bombing, yada, yada. And then they'll follow that up with like, I mean, yeah, it's not amazing. Like it's not the best show ever, but it's not how they're describing. So like, you know, you've got like Paul Tassi at Forbes. Like, I mean, the show's like a 3 or a 4 out of 10, but it's not a 1. Damn it!
Yeah,
that's your best.
Do you know what the thing is though? It really is. It really is one. It's fucking terrible. Really I think that honestly think Disney's bot farming this for reviews, because I went on to Rotten Tomatoes to look at a lot of the reviews, and there's a ton of 4 and 5 star reviews just out of nowhere. It's all 1 star, half star, half star, half star, half star, and out of nowhere, there's all these 4 and 5 star reviews, and overwhelmingly, they all follow the exact same review narrative, and that is, this show's nowhere near as bad as everyone's talking about, or ignore all the hate. This is a great show. Every single one, and it just goes on and on and on. And you can tell it's probably bots that have been hired to post it from a bot farm, and they're all posting at the same time using those same talking points. This thing isn't mediocre. It isn't just okay. It's awful. Yeah, it is absolutely terrible. Like I'm working on my script for the Acolyte at the minute. I've got about an hour's worth of stuff written, and I'm just scratching the surface. I'm just scratching the surface. You could go on for hours, and every scene contains significant basic writing mistakes. Here's just one example. You know the Wookiee Jedi?
Kalnaka.
Yeah, that was an interesting concept. I thought, okay, we've got a Wookiee Jedi. I don't have a problem with the Wookiee Jedi. I think that's an interesting concept. I think it's lore accurate, it's canonical, and I'm interested to explore that and see, well, how does a Wookiee Jedi interact with other Jedi and interact with the world as compared with previous Wookiees we've seen. And she just kills them off. She breaks the Chekhov's gun principle. That's really, really basic. And it's just and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of those really bad, really basic mistakes.
The Chekhov crossbow. Didn't fire it off.
My favorite one was, if we're just talking about the last episode, was the green chick, Jedi Master nepotism. She is talking to Saul and says, you know, like, we're going to go against the protocols. We're going to make it. We're not going to tell the council because they're this, that, and the other thing. And so we're just not going to report to them. And then they walk into the hallway like 30 seconds later, not even. And she's like, you know, it's protocol to tell me that there's a possibility that this person you thought was dead might have been alive. And it's like, you didn't give a shit about protocol about 30 seconds ago. So that's on the same page of the script. And no one even bothered to look to see that this person's opinion and their stance on what is the way to do things is completely different from line to line.
Yeah. Where was the proofreading here?
Yeah.
So, for example, if I wrote a script, I would probably toss it to Echo for proofreading, because Echo's he's a novelist. He has experience there. So I think, okay, Echo's the man for this. He'll proofread it. Who the hell do you think that there was any sort of proofreading process here for Leslie Headland's script? Because it doesn't seem to have gone through any sort of filter whereby people looked at it and said, okay, well, fires can't burn in space for a start, you know, and then there's this and this and this and this. She just seems to have this narcissistic notion that because it's coming from her, it must be brilliant, and it hasn't been proofread by anyone, because the script looks raw as hell. Yeah. Like there's been no refinement here. There's been no redrafting. It's shockingly bad.
There was no
even the idea that
table read. It's horrible.
Like if there's a drama, then one of the aspects of it is that you need to be sort of made to speculate on what people might be thinking. Like there's a disconnect between that creates some of the dramatic tension. Like, what could this person's motivation be? I don't quite understand where this person sits in relation to that. But no, everyone is just made out of cardboard, and everything is extraordinarily on a superficial level. It's just, like I said, it's fanfic. Very poor fanfic with identity politics mushed in there.
Before
I kind of understand it.
I asked my
Before we
wife
move-
to watch
Sorry,
it.
go
Oh,
ahead, Greg. No, you go ahead.
I wanted to get, well, first of all, I was just having a hard time writing jokes for episode 4 because it's just so god awfully boring that I couldn't even make it
nothing
funny.
burger. It's an absolute nothing burger.
It is. I think Jeremy Johns summed it up. His video title was just a walk through a forest downstage. Like literally nothing happens. So I asked my wife, I said, hey, can you watch it? Give me your thoughts. Don't watch episodes 1 through 3. Just watch episode 4. Her review, first of all, is that she fell asleep halfway through it, literally fell asleep. And then
Wow.
she said it dawned on her that she said that the issue that you guys are all having is that this really wasn't made for you. And not even like, oh, it was made for women. She said, this is made for actual children. This is like Disney show quality, Wizards of Waverly Place, Liv and Maddie.
Great reference. Yeah. That's
Like,
great.
she's like, this is the kind, because our kids they've watched some of that stuff, like our younger kids. So she's like, this is Disney Channel level stuff. And then as we're talking about this, my 10-year-old pops up and he's like, oh, hey, I was watching that show that you were talking about, Dad. I watched the first 2 episodes. It's awesome. And I'm like, oh my God, she's absolutely correct. This is made for 10 to 13-year-olds. This is like Disney's Descendants, Star Wars style. That's why it sucks so bad, because it's not made for anyone over the age of 14.
Yeah, I mean, George Lucas once said that Star Wars was made for 11-year-old boys. So I guess they're just like swapping that around. But at the same time, irrespective of whether or not that was his intention, it was also layered with the monomyth and other abstract ideas that you could latch onto as a teenager. Plus, there were things like actual love and adult relationships and tenderness and loyalty and compassion and romance, which seems to be by the by these days, irrespective of the vast amount of sexual ideology put into it, and themes of yearning for distant worlds and to get away, to be Luke and the farmstead looking at the binary sunset, and the idea of spectacle, which is also missing, and the other thing that's appealing to guys, which is gear porn, the idea that you like the lasers and you like the Millennium Falcon, which is basically a hot rod in space. So all of that taken away to just have this very sterile B grade or Z grade drama. So yeah, I didn't watch episode 4. I washed my hands of the whole thing, and you have no idea how good my soul feels. It's replenished. I feel lovely. I feel the weight is lifted from me. Yeah.
Before we move on from this discourse topic, I just wanted to look at this one comment that I saw. Can you bring that comment up, Becco? Because the idea here is that Amanda Stenberg has made this music video in which she basically identifies herself as being very much a member of the Black community, and she's being oppressed because she's Black, and people are hating on her show and they're hating on her because she's Black, and they just can't take seeing a Black woman in Star Wars. And that's very much the narrative that she goes with. So I saw this, and I thought that this really spoke to a lot of what was wrong with her video. And this isn't something that she would be able to argue against, since this is a Black man writing this. We'll beat her at her own game kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So this is what he writes. Okay, I get it. Being from an actual Black community in LA and having friends and cousins in Orange County that are mixed, I see what's happening. You're a mixed kid. So Amanda Stenberg is half white, half Black. Her father's a rich white man. Probably grew up in circumstances better than middle class, and you're not comfortable with yourself because more than likely you grew up outside the Black community and had more in common with a suburban white girl. So you become extra woke, and you're trying to fit in more with the Black community with the movies and the characters you're playing in films. I wonder if the producers picked her because they think she's a safe pick. They probably are afraid to choose someone actually from the Black community because they are too genuine and wouldn't do all the extra bullshit. I get it. It's sad. But I get it. She's the Kamala Harris. She's the Kamala Harris of Hollywood. Conveniently Black. She's woke when it's convenient, and certain white folks love that, especially the ones who want to say, well, I have a Black friend in conversation. Real talk, no matter what race you are. If you grew up in the lower middle class or below, I probably have more in common with you than her. And I thought that was an excellent comment.
Interesting.
It is. I'm working on a script on the side about the American Society of Magical Negroes, and the writer-director for that one, Kobe Levy, he has the exact same issue. He's also biracial, and a lot in common with her. Like, yeah, you're right. Her dad's rich. She went to NYU for filmmaking and then dropped out halfway through because she just didn't feel like it anymore. She's been working in Hollywood since a young age, so her parents have connections. Kobe Levy's the same way. Like, he went to Yale for acting. He's been working in Hollywood for a long time. And they're both talking about all this oppression stuff that I don't think they've ever actually faced. But I think that there are a lot of conflicting elements. I think there's a certain amount of white guilt that they've been fed, and like the half of them that's white, they're like, oh, I'm guilty about that, and I also want to be cool, and I want to fit in with the cool oppressed kids, so I'm going to overact this oppression thing that I've not ever faced because I'm a millionaire working in Hollywood. There's a lot of weird psychology going on with that, and I think it's especially bad for some of these biracial folks who feel like they don't know which camp to be in, and they want to choose an extreme side.
Her biggest mistake is she let the white side do the rapping.
That's true.
It was the biggest mistake.
Yeah. So Greg, how much I want to give her a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, if I can, which is the idea that if she's out on the street or living her daily life, people who don't know her circumstances. So if they want to come from a view of bigotry or prejudice, they don't know what her socioeconomic status is. And rather than see biracial, a lot of people who are bigoted will just see black out of those two options. So if she's just going into everyday situations with strangers and that kind of thing, then can we give her a little bit of benefit of the doubt that there will have been instances where she might face bigotry because people aren't familiar with her circumstances or background, just on the face of it?
It's definitely possible. I mean, like, obviously, everybody's going to have the one personal time or some situation. She probably has been called some kind of terrible name. The thing is, when people say racism, they mean a lot of different things. I don't know if this spread everywhere else, but for a couple of years, we had this microaggression word that we were trying to get off the ground that never got off the ground because everybody realized what a big steaming pile of crap that was. So it's a yes and no thing. Like, yeah, I'm sure she's met some people that saw her and she's not super white and they were mean. What that looks like, I don't know, because sometimes what I find when I hear people describe the racism that they faced, that what they're really describing are just assholes. And I've met a lot of assholes. I've had people be assholes to me. And I think sometimes it's just because they're assholes and I don't really have any other reason to pin it on other than, well, I met an asshole today and then I moved on with my day. And I think that's what a lot of it boils down to, is when they talk about, oh, I've faced oppression, and then you ask them what it is, and it's usually like mean comments, dirty looks, things of that nature. Well, hell, I've received those myself for various reasons. Maybe because I've got a bunch of kids, or maybe just because I'm a dude. Maybe and that's the other thing too, is like, people's personal experiences factor into that stuff. Like, I've spoken a lot about like a lot of these red pill guys. That stuff annoys me, and I think a lot of it is like, I've had women give me dirty looks, and it's probably because I remind them of some asshole that they met, some dude that was a real douchebag, and I look just like him, and they think, God, he reminds me of that guy. And okay, like, it doesn't, and then I move on with my day and they move on with theirs, and I never see them again in my entire life, and I don't even think about it ever. Yeah, that's I think that's
you're making a mistake. You got to go write a diss track. That's you're doing it wrong.
I totally
That exact thing happened to me when I was working in the States. I was in California, and I walked into a post office, and this girl, and this was just a little town called Greenville in North California, and this girl looked at me with absolute disgust, and I was kind of taken aback. I was saying, hi, and she goes, we've met. And I said, no, I never met you before. And she says, yeah, you met me. Last time we met, you said you were going to be like Fred Flintstone and make my bed rock. And apparently, I looked. Yeah, it's pretty good. But I looked exactly the same as some dickhead she'd met the year before. So she was. It was weird. It was
in her defense, the handlebars into mutton chops was a thing for a little while. So it may have just been that.
This was a long time ago. So I didn't have the glorious mutton chops back then.
That tweet kind of summed it up, though, I think, in the fact that I feel as though Disney, especially, they've curated these almost weaponized tokenism characters that they're just throwing into things. I forget the girl's name, but she was in like everything for a little while. She was in Willow and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I call her diversity mascot.
Yeah, there's a lot of like nicknames for her, and they kind of, it's basically they've farmed these specific people that they feel they can throw into roles and they're safe, just like that tweet said. And I could see someone being kind of upset about that. It's just how you handle it is not to do this. So.
One last thing on this, Greg, is the idea that if you're in California, I mean, there's so much mitigation in terms of like a dominant force. Like in California, I think the demographics, it's like white people are almost a plurality now, like less than 50%. So if you've got such a vast amount of mixed interracial culture there, then the idea of racism might have less of a sting than if you're like in the middle of Nebraska, for example.
Yeah, I mean, and I've never been out there. You know, I've been living in the Midwest forever. So, and it's like, it's anecdotal. Obviously, you know, she may have had different experiences, and me saying, well, I've never seen it doesn't really prove anything, but that is still the truth. Like, I've been living in this area for almost 4 decades, and it's just not, maybe it just happens and I don't notice it. I don't know. But I think oftentimes people want to interpret things a certain way. And I imagine that she's just met some people that are just kind of grumpy, and she interpreted it to be racism. Or, you know, maybe she has been facing the racism of low expectations for a lot of her career, because she is kind of the safe, you know, the light-skinned Black person. And so she's probably been tokenized a lot. She's probably had a lot of producers or casting directors that have said things to the effect of like, yeah, you're the kind of diversity that we're looking for. And maybe that is infantilizing, and maybe she's tired of being treated that way and is, you know, just channeling it toward the, you know, the racist Star Wars fans or something. You know, I don't really know what her experience has been, but just from what I've heard her describe, or I've heard people like this describe, it usually amounts to a bunch of nothing that any adult would just kind of brush off, but some people don't.
Yeah, I mean,
I will
if you're rapping about, you know, it's been 400 years of hate and I'm sick of this shit, it's a little overwrought, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Especially coming from someone, and I think this is almost certainly true, and we could all identify with this. I mean, not personally, but having seen it happen. She has probably been treated better in her life than the vast majority of people, just on a personal level, because she's hot, because she's a beautiful woman.
Oh, yeah.
People will treat her better. She walks into a restaurant, you know, she walks into a nightclub in Denmark, where she went to live for several months to retain her Danish passport, because she just can do that. She's a wealthy family. She could just take off to Europe for several months to go not work and just party, because she's so oppressed. Wherever she goes, she'll be treated better because she's a beautiful woman. That is okay, hot privilege is a thing, right? White privilege isn't a thing. Doesn't exist. Hot privilege does exist, okay? Beautiful women do get treated better, and there's been plenty of surveys that show this, and she is a beautiful woman. So she is going she's going to be treated better as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like Echo was like, and look at these 4 ugly dudes. Just for
I was enjoying looking at her photo, and then all of a sudden I got to look at us. Like, wow.
Right. You're just talking about pretty privilege, and then all of us pop up. Like,
just dudes.
It's just terrible.
Anyway, I just needed to figure out that I was going to
let's do chat a favor, and let's all just.
But it's still a picture of you.
Damn it,
Greg! It's worse. It's worse. Oh, it's better now.
I at least have a little cartoon of myself.
Yeah, that's nice.
I still maintain that no matter what, I'm still better looking than Carey Mulligan.
Yes, I think we can all agree on that. I think, yeah. I just want to get through some super chats that are nice and racking up here. So, Castle Dracula, for the sum of $3. Did Stenberg really write a 60-page character bio?
No.
She had AI write a 60-page character bio. That's my guess.
Yeah.
With some of it pictures, like a pin board.
Yeah. What do they call it? A dream board, an inspiration board. I can't remember. But she had a lot of, you know, to get through. She had to talk about her bisexuality, her non-binariness, and tons of other things for her characterization. So probably would have taken 10 pages or so. Evan Dubiel for $5 there. Amanda Stenberg may be the new queen of cringe. You go, girl. Rachel Zegler. Yeah, imagine those two together. In fact,
Rachel Zegler still has
the
movie to come out, though. That's the thing.
That's true. Yeah.
She still has the chance to reclaim that.
I bet they would despise each other because they're both trying to be the alpha bitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess
they
that's
both want to
true.
be Queen Bee, and they would just get in each other's way and tear each other's hair out. It'd be good. It'd be fun to watch.
Well, it would be.
Somebody make a reality TV show with those two.
It would be a victim off. That's all it would be.
Man,
it
it would be like
No,
Paris
no.
and what's her face all over.
They would be They would be ostensibly, superficially, extremely friendly to each other, cradling each other, giving each other compliments. But then the passive-aggressive little things would start to creep in, like, "Oh my God, your physique, like you're so muscular," and little sort of passive-aggressive stuff would come in.
Well, anybody looks muscular next to Rachel Zegler.
Like, oh my God, I love that dress. My grandma wore that, and she looked great in
Yeah, that kind of stuff. M8566 for $5. I hate to be hyperbolic. No, that's what we live for on this channel. But can you guys think of a show that contradicts itself more than The Acolyte? You'd be pretty hard pressed, I guess. Contradicts itself.
The most self-contradictory piece of media that I've ever seen is Barbie. The Acolyte, I haven't examined in close enough detail yet to say, but it does contradict itself a lot.
I think script, like the script, the wording is probably more contradictory than Barbie, only because it's going to be a lot longer of a script. There's probably a lot more micro contradictions, but I think on the grander scale, you're probably right. Barbie is it?
Yeah, that probably said quite nicely. And look at this, Johnny Close for the extraordinary sum of $20. Just a big thumbs up. Well, a big thumbs back, right back at you, buddy. And then DarkHour can give a thumbs up right underneath the message there. For DarkHour, it's always consigned underneath.
It's fine. I actually like doing these little like, hey, I'm still here, guys.
And Floyda for $5. Are some aspects of the Acolyte designed to be hated, like Velma? You mean like it's provocatively designed to be provocative and get a reaction?
I think so.
I don't think they're that smart.
No, I think that there is some of that involved with anything that Disney does at this point, because it's kind of the there's no such thing as bad publicity. People are talking about it. And it's they're still trying to like farm those the rage clicks, the hate watches, all that stuff.
I mean, I think that was working, but we're seeing that start to fall apart. I mean, Doctor Who is perfect example of that. And I don't disagree with you that like that's what they thought they were going to get, but I think that they're entering a time where it's not working as much, and they're still trying it. So I don't disagree with you at all. Just I'm happy to see that it's not working anymore.
No, I don't think it's working the same as well as it used to. But I think there's still it's like they always say, Hollywood's always like 2 years behind the trend, and I think they're behind the trend of the fact that it's not working. That's diminishing returns now.
Yeah, and Greg is right. For example, Magical Negroes really leaned hard into that. They really wanted to ignite a culture war and for everybody to be fucking raging on Twitter, and nobody cared. And then Doctor Who had an interracial gay kiss, and it had no impact on the culture war. It didn't even scratch the surface. It was mentioned a couple of times in a couple of YouTube videos, but nobody cared. So, and that was very specifically designed to be a controversial moment that would have the fucking chuds just rage, and it didn't work. Nobody cared.
Yeah, good point. So where does that leave us, though? Like, so they would then say that, well, it didn't have the reaction that we hoped, but, and then they'll just flip to saying that, well, that shows that it's normalized and that this isn't remarkable anymore. And that's the real takeaway. That's the real positive message, is that this is just normalized and people appreciate it as their entertainment. So I guess that's where they would pivot. But it must be strange for them. Like, this is going to be a moment of, we've got the keys to make, to do this and to show progressivism. And it's a big gamble. And it's going to be audacious for us to do this. And it's going to be a huge reaction. Some of it positive, some of it a backlash. And then it just kind of peters out. It must be strange for them.
I think it would require for them to be able to say that it's been normalized, that there's actually ratings that are showing people are watching it.
That would help.
It's really hard to support your claim that, oh, look, everyone's cool with it if no one's watching it.
Yeah. I think everybody's just kind of moving on, and they won't learn the right lesson, but it would be great if somebody somewhere looked at, Inside Out 2's numbers, and then they looked at Doctor Who's numbers, Acolyte numbers, some of these other shows that are just absolutely bombing, and ask themselves what is the difference. Inside Out 2 did not set out to antagonize its audience in any way, and it's just selling gangbusters. And then you have these shows that, like Velma, that, I mean, it was straight up designed to piss the audience off, or She-Hulk, right? They wrote in things to piss the audience off, and then wrote in the next episode, haha, we knew it'd get you guys mad. Like, we predicted it. We're so smart and clever. And it's just not working anymore. Yeah.
You've got to be in control of the irony. And if you're not in control of the irony and you're trying to preempt people, then it's cringe. But this is great from Sky High. I went to school with the guy who directed Magical Negroes. He was a theater nerd with all white friends and was a teacher's pet. So,
and it shows.
Yeah, he's been trying to do theater for a long time. He's been trying to do a lot of something. You know, what I'll give Kobe is that he's not a slouch. He's been trying to work in the industry for like 14 years. He was on The Daily Show, on the Jordan Klepper show for a while, and then he did some theater, and then he's done some bit parts in movies, and then I don't know how he managed to get someone to finance an entire movie that he wrote and directed that he's never directed or written a full movie before. But the guy's been thrown himself at it for a long time. I think he sucks. I think he's like no talent, but he's not lacking in effort. That's for sure.
God, at what point though do you? And this is a serious question. It's a question that all artists eventually have to face. I mean, I had to go through this in my own attempt to be a musician. At what point do you give up and say, do you know what, this just isn't going to happen?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not very talented, or whatever I do, it's just maybe the culture has passed it by, and I'm doing stuff that might have worked 20 years ago, but it's all over now. At what point do you just give up? Because this Magical Negroes guy, has been trying for probably the guts of 20 years, and he's just a talentless fucking hack. And he's like we just said with this Magical Negroes movie, he's trying stuff that maybe would have got off the ground 5 years ago and ignited a bit of interest in the culture war and caused some controversy. But he's aping tropes that are just years old and played out. And at what point does he just say, "Oh, screw this"? I think I'll go get a job in an office and stop this nonsense.
I think a person who had that type of self-reflection to be able to say that to themselves would have also had the self-reflection to seek out the ability to get better, whether it be going to someone who can improve their writing or whatever the problem is. And so that's the problem with those kind of people, is that they can't self-reflect enough to realize that it's not going to work. And if people are still going to throw money at dumb shit like Magical Negroes, then they're never going to learn.
Well, nobody did throw money at. That's the.
Well, I'm saying he got paid.
Well, that's true. Yeah, he got paid.
The problem for me is ergo identity. The idea that I'm in charge of the Star Wars project. Star Wars is a big, huge brand. Ergo, and I'm lesbian. Ergo, I will infuse it with lesbianism and lesbian themes and lesbian ideas. And I'm the showrunner for Doctor Who, and it's a huge property. And I'm gay. Ergo, I'll just infuse it with tons of gay themes in my gay identity. So it's ergo identity is a phrase I want to try and get going.
Yeah, it's there is a guy that's been he's been touring around for a couple of years. Rob Henderson is his name, and he's got this idea called luxury beliefs, and he gives these talks every now and then. And the thrust of his argument is that there are luxury beliefs that have taken the place of possessions that would show that you have luxury, and their beliefs such as, you know, I was raised in I have dual citizenship and my dad is super rich and I've been working in Hollywood for over a decade, but I have been oppressed for 400 years. That's a luxury. That's a belief that you only hold to show other people your status as one of the elite, because you have the luxury of holding that belief. A normal person can't walk around with that belief. It would be detrimental to them economically to treat the world that way. But someone like Amandla is in a position where she can espouse those ideas, and that's her luxury belief. Like I said, the guy's name is Rob Henderson. He's got a book out or something, but he's got tons of videos, and he's been on other people's deals. He articulates the idea very, very well.
Yeah, I've heard of that. That's particularly true with mass immigration as well, because the people that propose mass immigration, they're not the ones working low-wage jobs that have the wages artificially dampened by the increase in labor. Yeah. They're not the ones living in these shitty, crammed, overpopulated housing estates where the rent is just skyrocketing, even though the accommodations are shite, because there are many, many migrants willing to pay for that rent. You know, they're not the teenager in Canada who can't get a job because the ice cream shop is full of Indians. Like, they don't have to deal with the consequences of this policy because they're an investment banker and they live in a 99% white area.
Yeah. A gated community, bleeding heart liberal is the term.
Yeah, and you know, they'll talk about open borders. Meanwhile, they live in a mansion in an area with acreage laws. If you don't know what acreage laws are, basically it means if your house isn't 10 acres, you can't build it in our area. In other words, millionaires only.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, has anyone been watching House of the Dragon.
I have.
All right. I love the show. I'm glad that it's there. I just have DarkHour a little slight feeling that nihilism and bleakness can be a very quick, sophisticated shortcut to sophistication on screen. But it can also have limits and go too much the other way and be too nihilistic and too bleak. If there's an almost total absence of heart as a kind of leavening aspect to that. So I just feel there's a little bit of that with this show, that you want to replicate the idea of what societies back then were like, which it's very savage, it's very ruthless, it's very Machiavellian, which is fine. But I just think it's just lacking just one tiny drop of actual heart and connection. You get a little bit of it with the parents and the children, but even then it's very subdued and kind of nominal. There's a fascinating thing about the character of Damon, where the show writer was saying, asking rhetorically, why are so many guys finding this character so great? He's not likable. He's an anti-hero. And the answer to that is that he's just, in and of himself, incredibly compelling in terms of his characterization. There's a masculinity there, which I think is very appealing. And one thing I was thinking about, he's one of those rare things which is a masculine character done well in the modern age. And I think it's a lot to do with how men comport themselves. Like I was thinking it in terms of musicians will often say that once they reach a certain maturity, it's not so much the notes that you play, but it's the notes that you leave out, which can define how good you are and how quality you are as an improviser, as a performer. And I think you can make an analogy there with how guys talk and interact and think. It's the silences, it's the pauses, it's the analysis, it's the taking account of someone, and it's that control of those rhythm and that tone of silence as much as saying. That's a really cool masculine trait of compelling masculine characters, which I think is really exemplified by this character and the brilliant Matt Smith. So that's why he's appealing and compelling. He's also a maverick and a loose cannon, and he's kind of amoral, you genuinely think. But it looks lavish, it looks beautiful. Some of the dialogue is almost like Shakespearean in some of those scenes where it's just two characters in a room. It's great.
I just want to touch on, because you said the dialogue is so good, because when I've watched the first episode, one thing I've noticed is how well written a lot of the dialogue is. And I'll give just one example. There's a scene where a rat catcher says, I know that castle like the shape of my own cock. And that's a brilliant line, because a bad writer would use a dead metaphor. So a dead metaphor is a metaphor which no longer has the impact it was originally designed for, because it's been so overused that the visuals it's supposed to elicit in the listener's head, they no longer take place. So, for example, if he said, I know that castle like the back of my hand, you don't actually envisage, him looking at the back of his hand. It doesn't have any emotional or impact. It doesn't create a picture in the mind. But when he says, I know that castle like the shape of my own cock, you remember that because you've never heard that phrase before. It's fresh and it's interesting. And I'm listening to that thinking that writer seems to understand, either consciously or instinctively, the concept of dead metaphor. So that's a good experienced writer. Just from that one line, you can tell.
It also plays into the fact that a lot of times the lower level people will use those like a phrasing that would be considered like very lewd, very and he wouldn't have said something very eloquent, because his job is to catch rats. He's probably eats them. It's probably like it's not a good job to have. And so for him to say anything that would have been more eloquent would have actually taken you out of the character of listening to the character speak and thinking, he's not well written. So yeah, right on what you just said.
I mean, some of it, the way that it's put across, it does look like it's being performed on a stage. The way that the actors, like the blocking, the way that the actors will move around during dialogue, and then they'll exasperatedly go over to a window and then return and then swirl and merge around each other. It looks great. It looks professional. And all the characters are extraordinarily flawed. And even a character who's supposed to restrain themselves and be ironical and in control, like Otto Hightower, I think it is. By the end of the second episode, he's become so exasperated that he loses the plot and falters. And it's amazing. I like that. The things about the characters that have gotten them to their positions and stations, and they lose control over it. And there's not actually any principal action. It's still building up to the idea of a big conflict, and there's still machinations that are happening largely off screen, but there's just this simmering sense of tension and malaise and unease, which is impacting everything. So it's impressive stuff. I'm very, very happy with it.
You also see, just watching this, you can see a lot of the mistakes by contrast that, for example, the Acolyte is making. So in the first scene of the Acolyte, Amandla Stenberg murders Trinity, Master Jedi Trinity, in Cantina. And here's the thing, when Trinity dies, there's no angry relatives that come looking for the murderer. There's no secret lover who comes out of the woodwork to try to go after this little bitch that murdered her. There's no scene in episode 2 where, you know, a middle-aged man walks into the bar and he's very, very upset, and he starts interrogating people, saying, who did this? Who killed Master Jedi Trinity? And we later discover that this was her secret lover. There's none of that. Trinity is there, she drops dead, and there are no consequences for this. No one, there are no people who come looking for answers, like, why is my sister dead, sort of thing.
Right.
It has that she is simply disconnected from the world that the character is written into, because Leslie Headland only wanted the character for the one scene, so she doesn't need to be connected to the world. It's just the most appalling middle school level writing. I mean, I wouldn't even call it. I wouldn't even call it
world around the
sophomoric.
scene. Yeah, there's no world around the scene. It's just the scene in its primitive, basic constructs as a function. Yeah.
It's not even sophomore, because I would expect better from a university student. I honestly think this is high school level stuff. It's fucking terrible. But you go to this, you know, the kid dies at the end of season 1, and a lot of episode 1 are the consequences of that, the emotional consequences, the mother mourning, and the family seeking revenge, and this leads to other mistakes. We'll not get into any spoilers here, but it leads to other mistakes, and it leads to rash actions. And the point that the show is making is that whenever you have a tragedy, that can often lead to a cascade of tragedies. It's a
domino effect.
It can create a domino effect. And that's wonderful, because it's not like a character just died and then that's it. That scene's done. Let's go on to the next scene. That has consequences that affect the entire world, and affect it in very profound ways. It has a kind of butterfly effect. It spirals out of control, and that's realistic, and it makes the world feel lived in and real, and it's something that you can emotionally invest in.
And the dragons feel almost superfluous at times, like they play such a limited role. So it's good stuff.
Well, that's good though, because if they overuse the dragons, they would lose the punch of when they're actually used. So
yeah, well, and I think that I agree with you, DarkHour. Like, I think that was they're kind of on the periphery in the first episode. I only watched the first episode, and you almost get a sense that they are really powerful because they're not just being used for any old conflict. And then you have characters that are like, oh, this is going to turn into a full dragon battle, and they kind of refer to it almost as we would, like, mutually assured nuclear destruction kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. That's what
I like the way that they sort of allude to how powerful they are. You never, I didn't in the first episode, you didn't see him kill anybody, except for the recap of the first season when the dragon bit the other one in half or something. And
the best part about that is that scene also shows that, you know, a larger dragon is going to deal with a smaller dragon easily, and most of the dragons they do that whole math in the first season where they're like, oh, we have 14, they have 3, but it's like they have 3 full-grown dragons, whereas most of ours are like adolescents.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of little layers to how they're using the dragons, which is fantastic.
Yeah. And I think the costuming is better in this one as well. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Just the sets, the costumes, it didn't have that overly clean Rings of Power look to it. It was very, I don't know. I was really drawn in. I'd never seen the show before, and I was still invested by the end of the first episode.
Yeah, the only people who look clean are ones that have money to look clean, and there's not many of them in the show. Most people that are throughout there, and they even have a scene in this the most recent episode where they talk about that, like, oh, you're supposed to represent the chastity and all this, and you have mud on your clothes. So it's like, and he's a very specific character in that situation. So yeah, I do like that. The only complaint I have is there are some, and this might be a holdover from the end of Game of Thrones as well. There are some scenes that I wish were lit a little better from time to time, because I get a little lost in. I don't want to give a spoiler for the most recent episode, but the last scene, so to say, with similar looking people and such in a dark room, that was a little hard to follow. And I was watching it pretty closely. So
the Battle of the Night, or the Night Battle, or whatever it was called.
Oh yeah.
Like the lighting in that was absolutely shocking. That was probably that was like the apex, or the nadir, I should say, of that dark lighting trend, which was a big thing for a while. It was really bad in Obi-Wan Kenobi as well. But my God, the Battle of the Long Night was absolutely terrible. If you had worked really hard on that as a production designer or something, you would be fucking livid because the audience couldn't see a damn thing.
Yeah, that's why I said it might be a little bit of a remnant from the end of Game of Thrones, where they're still trying to do that sort of dimly lit aspect. It's not as bad. It's nowhere near that episode. But there are from time to time, I'm like, I wish I could see this a little bit better. That's a very small complaint in the greater scheme of things. Everything else has been really good.
Yeah. But yeah, you can just you can feel the attention to detail. Like there was one scene in the first episode where I don't know these people's names, but the one gal is coming in from riding a dragon, and she says something like, "I've just patrolled like the whole ocean. There's a blockade that I'm protecting, whatever." And she looked mussed. Her hair looked as though wind had been going through it a lot. Her dress was wrinkled. She looked dusty. Like it's little details like that add to the believability and the reality of a show, where they really think, okay, what was this character just doing? And what is their mood going to be because they were just doing this activity? What should they look like? What should they be act like? She was tired. She just said, I patrolled this whole thing. I need to go eat. I need to go rest. Little stuff like that really impressed me when I'm looking at a lot of these other shows where you can tell blocking wasn't considered. You can tell costuming wasn't considered. They were just like, here's the lines to get to the next scene. Please read these so we can get to the next scene. And that's it.
Yeah. That actually adds to the dragons themselves too, is that they're treated as characters. She mentions that the dragon needs to eat and rest. It's not just a vessel which you can ride infinitely and it can fire, it could breathe fire infinitely, and we don't need to worry about it. It still needs to be treated as such. It needs to be treated as though it is a character, which is a really good touch to it. I feel like they didn't really do that much in Game of Thrones. But then again, when they started using the dragons more, there wasn't books anymore that they were drawing from. So,
yeah. Well, Greg, thanks for giving me this little tip. So this is from George R.R. Martin. Everywhere you look, there are more screenwriters and producers eager to take great stories and make them their own. It does not seem to matter whether the source material was written by Stan Lee, Charles Dickens, Ian Fleming, Roald Dahl, Ursula K. Le Guin, J.R.R. Tolkien, Mark Twain, Raymond Chandler, Jane Austen, or, well, anyone. No matter how major a writer it is, no matter how great the book, there always seems to be someone on hand who thinks he can do better, eager to take the story and improve on it. The book is the book, the film is the film, they will tell you, as if they were saying something profound. Then they make the story their own. They never make it better, though. 999 times out of 1,000, they make it worse. So I'm glad that he came up with that sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's... I know that's been going around a lot, and I mean, he absolutely nailed it, because we're seeing that constantly. And I know we talked about some examples, and I think the really visible stuff is, we're making characters gay right now. So I'm trying to think of other examples that doesn't sound like just the damn gays. I think The Witcher is a really good example of that. We saw Henry Cavill leave. We see people that are will tell you that to tell you what's changed from those books, it would be easier to just tell you what's the same, and it's pretty much just the names of the characters and the places. That's pretty much the only similarity that those that show carries with the books. And the show wasn't good, and that's it. That's the thing. Like Martin's saying here, one time out of 1,000, it turns out great, and everybody has that one. Oh, The Shining, that was the one example. That's the one time. That's great. What about the other 999? And The Witcher is a really good example for me, or Wheel of Time is a good example for me, where I don't feel like people were injecting identity politics. Wasn't like their number one goal. I just think that they had the hubris to think, oh, I know better than the person that wrote this. I know better than Sapkowski. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. I know better than Robert Jordan. I know better than these guys. I'm going to make this show. I'm going to fix their mistakes. And it turns out to be total slop. And then you got to bring in Liam Hemsworth, and that's not going to work out.
Yeah. All right, so Greg, you're going to take us through Dragon Age Veilguard. What the hell is going on?
It's
let me read this. This is one of these things. It's like one of Vex's tweets where I parachute into the middle of it and I have no idea what anything is. My first thought as I watched the dev take us through Dragon Age, the Veilguard's character creator at Summer Game Fest was, okay, everyone can shut up about Cyberpunk 2077 now. I have long taken issue with Cyberpunk 2077's progressive, read fetishistic and narratively bankrupt character creator with its customizable trans penis that the game actively ignores during romance scenes and pronouns tied to voice. It acknowledges the trans experience in a multitude of ways, likely owing heavily to game director Corinne Bush being a trans woman, and therefore able to inject a personal perspective that most other games lack. What am I looking at here, Craig?
A lot of stuff there. So Cyberpunk 2077 was by a different studio, but yeah, they had a penis slider. You could that was a big deal. You created your character and you could make them look however you want, and you could change the size of their junk or the size of their boobs. It could be a man or a woman or a non-binary character or whatever. And usually in these games, you never see your character for the most part. It's like you create him, and then after that, like, what's the point? But with Dragon Age, that's a different studio, and this has been in development hell for a full decade at this point. And they released the trailer, they released some gameplay for it, and some of the controversy is the game's director, Corinne Bush, who's a trans woman, and one of the quotes that the director said was, because these are role-playing games, and you can create your own character. They look however you want. They're companion characters that you can befriend, you can romance them, you can sleep with them. So it is a role-playing game. You play it the way you want. And the director said, well, I always saw myself. I loved that I was represented in this game. So I'm going to make it even more personalized to me. And that's the issue is, yeah, you saw yourself in the game because everybody was able to see themselves in the game. It's a role play. They could role play however they wanted. But now you're shrinking that window to make it about you. And now it's going to be a problem.
And just touching on Cyberpunk 2077, the game director seemed massively over-concerned with identity and sexuality. The launch of the game was an absolute disaster. Like, it's an infamous disaster. Because a lot of AAA games are criticized today for coming out and not being finished or being just buggy as hell to the point where they're unplayable. Two recent examples of that. Well, Gollum was a recent example of that. And then a couple of years ago, the GTA Definitive Edition was another one where they remastered the GTA PS2 edition, PS2 games, and it was a complete train wreck. And now 2077, when that came out, that thing was an absolute mess. It took them years. It took them several years to patch it so that the game was actually good. Yeah. But when it came out initially, it was basically unplayable. It was an absolute mess. And I'm thinking, if the devs and if the game director had been more concerned with actually making it as playable as possible and addressing all the bugs rather than being concerned with transsexuality and penis sliders, the game might actually have been good on day one.
Yeah, there were so many. The hype train was like nothing I've ever seen, and I mean, it never could have lived up to how they hyped it up. But it was a pretty epic fail. They lied to the consumers. It was unplayable on old generation consoles. It was very bad. And the other issue with this one is it's suffering from the director, trying to make it about them, but it's also suffering from something that we're seeing in a lot of entertainment. It's trying to appeal to like this mass audience, because you had that previous picture, and this is the fourth game in this series. I think the first one came out in 2007, 2009, something like that.
Sounds about right.
It was like a really dark, gritty fantasy. Like that was kind of its fame. That was its claim to fame, was the world is very dark. It's very morally gray. Like, I played the first one, and in this world, the elves used to be very powerful, but then their gods were locked away, and now they're like third-class citizens. They live in ghettos. They're not the elves of Tolkien. The dwarves have a pretty brutal caste system. And in one part of the game, there's a dwarf that's in one of the poor caste people, and you can kind of work to build him up and take over and be the king of the dwarves. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. He's gonna bring justice, and I think I'm making the right choice. And then he's like, cool, I'm the king. All my political enemies need to die at this point. And I'm like, oh, I thought I was the good person. And that was kind of their approach, was there's no click the blue option to be the good guy, click the red option to be evil. It was all very shades of gray. and that's been kind of their aesthetic for a long time. Everything's very gritty. It's very difficult. There's lots of blood. It's very brutal. And then there's this Fortnite looking thing that they brought out, and it just feels like they thought, okay, we want the big audience, we want to appeal to the broad, and you're going to end up appealing to so many people that you're going to appeal to no one.
Well, it's all a mystery to me. Very strange. But Bridgeton boss Greg responds to backlash over Francesca and Michael Sterling changes. So let me see if I can go through the layers here. So okay, you've got Jane Austen, the writer. So she's seeing her society through her writing. And then you got one step removed where you've got a creator in the 21st century has made Bridgeton, which is seeing Jane Austen through a weird kind of lens of identity and progressivism. And then now you're going one step further from there where you've got the relationship that was hetero is now being transferred from Michael into Michaela to become a lesbian relationship. So we're just getting further and further through these steps of lenses into this weird kaleidoscope nonsense.
I have a quick question before we get into this. Has anybody here seen any of Bridgerton?
I saw the first season.
I saw one episode just for cultural reference.
Okay, well, Greg, you seem to be the Bridgerton expert, having seen one season.
I am married to a Bridgerton expert.
What do you think?
So get her on the stream. Just bring her in. Just slot her in instead of you for this.
She doesn't want to be on camera. I just need her to come in here and just speak disembodied off screen.
Yeah, I'm useless to this topic. So,
but I'm angry, Greg, because in the latest series, it's a body positivity woman who's the main lead. So she's a bit on the plump side. So why haven't they made her a black lesbian body positive character? That's my frustration.
Right. They didn't do like Echo. They didn't compile on all of the various identities. They only gave her one. That's why she's not as good.
Yeah. But I mean, this is it, right? They can't go any further than this. This is they've substituted everything they can substitute, right? There's nothing left.
I mean, well, you could do at this point, yeah, they have. No, but this is the same franchise takeover thing. Like I read that article, and it's the same thing. Like the showrunner is, I think she's a lesbian. She calls herself queer, which that word doesn't have strong meaning anymore. But she said, well, the gal on the left, that's Francesca, and she said I really identified with her. I believe that her husband is dead. Hey, babe. Yeah. Is Francesca single because her husband's dead, right? Yeah. Okay. So he dies, and then she meets a new guy, Michael, right? And she's very on the fringe. She's very introverted. Her husband has died. She's in this, aristocratic society. So of course she's like 27. She's a spinster. Might as well just get cats at that age. You're never going to meet anybody.
On the shelf.
Yeah, you're done. And so the showrunner said, well, I really identified with her because, I'm kind of on the outskirts. As a queer person, I'm a little different. I identified with her introvertedness. There were a lot of things in the character that I saw in myself. And so she needs to be exactly like me. And it kind of irritated me when I read it because I thought, there's a lot of women that like the character Francesca because they feel like they're a little introverted. They feel like they don't, they're not one of the cool kids, whatever. Like there are a lot of people that identify with a character like that. It reminds me of the X-Men 97 showrunner that said the exact same thing. He was like, oh, I identify with the X-Men because I'm a gay man. And I really loved how they portrayed being an outsider. And I thought, yeah, so did the rest of us nerdy kids. Everybody loved X-Men because that's what you liked. If you were a weirdo, that's the point. And so, but this showrunner thought, well, no, it's all about me. I need to be the one to be represented. So now she's gay.
God damn it. The whole thing sucks. Everything's stupid now. Anyway, it's time for the Acolyte. We need to go through and we need to find out what is the stupidest thing about the Acolyte. Are you ready? All right, buckle in.
This is what I've been waiting for. So
yeah. Well, buckle up.
The rest of this was all bullshit. This is what I came here for.
Acolyte.
All right, so the score. We go through bracket by bracket until we can find out what is the stupidest thing in the Acolyte. But this includes internal and external elements. So you can have like publicity tours, rap songs, etc. They can all be in the mix. So it's on screen and off screen. All right. Well, our first bracket, just to get things rolling: Fire in Space versus Stone on Fire. So which is the stupidest out of those two things?
Who's starting?
Greg, we'll just go vertically.
Oh, it's got to be stone on fire. I mean, you could at least because you can see some kind of gas. You could try to it's a gas fire. There's something, but stone and metal don't just erupt into flames like that.
Yeah, maybe you might have won me over. I don't know, but Despot, what do you think?
Oh, there was a brilliant tweet about the fire in space. I can't remember who sent it, but it was something like fire in space. This is what happens when you get rid of mansplaining. And stone on fire. I mean, here's the thing: that it's not Earth, so maybe on this other planet, this stone has some sort of flammable quality, right? Or maybe the witches covered it in I don't know, petroleum or something, because they're witches and they like petroleum for whatever reason. They like the smell of it. But fire in space, no, this isn't possible. It doesn't matter if there are gases leaking from the ship. There can be no fires in space. The vacuum of space would just immediately, and it doesn't matter. I'll not mansplain. Fire in space for me.
Fire in space. Okay, DarkHour.
So I agree with Greg, and the reason why I agree with him goes even further. The fire in space is kind of inconsequential to anything about the story. Even if it was just an explosion and like electricity sparks, it would have had the same effect. The stone and steel on fire, and not only does it engulf incredibly quickly, like this is a giant temple that completely goes up in flames in a matter of like minutes. It is the driving narrative for everything about this stupid revenge tour that she's on.
Yeah,
the premise is just broken.
Yeah, like and she's on a revenge tour against herself. That's the crazy part about the whole thing. So I have to go with that because of how much it affects the story. The other one is just it's a stupid little detail that should have been caught in a read, but.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, you won me over. So fire and buildings it is. Yeah. Okay, good. Bracket number 2. So body positivity, fat diabetes, or yes.
Wait. I'm sorry. I try it again.
Yes.
She's a powerful leader. She's a powerful leader.
Because I feel that Star Wars is very patriarchal. Okay, so
I think we're all going to agree on this one. I'm just
well, are we though? Because this is on-screen versus off-screen elements. So is this a consensus? Because diabetes, that's a lot going on there. So, Greg,
I'm going with the yes.
All right, fine. Despot.
I'm going to go with Darth Fridge Invader because I have an entire section on my Acolyte script in which I talk about how little this makes sense, and I give many reasons for it, and I give him many nicknames. My favorite is KFCPO.
That's good.
That's a good one.
Another good one is Obi-Swan Kenobi. Morbidly Obi-Swan Kenobi.
Did you just write that entire section just to justify all of these?
I have like a dozen of them because I couldn't pick just one, so I have like 12.
I'm doing something similar with the master character. I'm in mine, so I'm doing something.
But I actually have like a 10-minute section in which I go through and explain why this Fat Jedi is so broken and why it just destroys the lore. So I'm gonna go with Fat Jedi.
All right. Well, DarkHour.
You may have just won me over. I was gonna say, like he might have just. As he gets better with the Force, he gets lazier, so I might have been able to like accept that. Whereas these press tours for these shows and movies and everything that Lucasfilm does have just become like death knells to all their properties.
Yeah,
and this was a pretty solid example of that. So I think I'm going to stick with my original pick on the yes, which I can't do. I'm sorry, my voice doesn't do that stuff. But it just, I feel like preemptively screwing you over is worse than it. This is one of those ones that it might end up being, if he comes back and is a character that shows up more, I would change my mind. But he was so limited that, so I'm going to go with yes.
Hey, that man has a lot of things, but limited is not one of them.
All right. So Yaz moves on, which means our third bracket is lesbian space witches versus Yord's pecs.
What is up with those pecs? Seriously, what is?
Is it the whole, just the fact that they're lesbian space witches, or is it the?
No,
is
it's the dance sequence basically.
The one
the
too many.
Power of one. Yeah, the power
that
of two.
wins.
Power of
Hands
one.
down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hands down.
Right. Any dissent on this?
Maybe inflatable waving arm, 2 women. That wins.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say so. I have no objection to a little bit of middle-aged twink kink. No objection at all.
Yeah, they did try to do like attempt to use him as some sort of thirst trap. It just doesn't really work well. But you can't. The champion of this whole thing is going to be lesbian space guy. I don't even know why we're having this bracket.
Like,
but,
I don't know.
They have the power of many. Echo. I mean, Yord only has the power of one. The space witches have the power of many.
Well, no, I don't know. There's some competition out there, so hold your horses. Now, this is an interesting one. So, the concept of the levitating Jedi, or the facial hair of the levitating Jedi.
All right, now Greg.
It's the facial. Now that I'm looking at it closely, I can see his original hairline sticking out from under the cap they tried to stick on it. It's bulging out.
Yeah. Good point.
Makeup for the $180 million movie. That makeup has to be it.
Yeah, I think the concept of a levitating Jedi is fine. You know, he's meditating. He's at one with the Force. Right. But the fucking hairline popping out from the bad makeup, and this guy who is clearly in his 20s but is made very poorly to look like he's in his 40s. It's so bizarre and uncanny valley, and he looks like a member of a 1970s prog rock band. Specifically, looks like a guy from Yes. I even have a section on him too, and on how he commits suicide because he regrets Yes's 1997 album.
If you already have an hour done, this is gonna be the longest video ever made.
Yeah, whatever. I'm going for the makeup. Definitely the bad makeup.
Yeah, I agree with the makeup on that. Honestly, the conceptually, I don't really mind what they did with him. I mean, they ended up screwing it up anyway. But the concept of a Jedi kind of self-imposing, because usually they just exile themselves to some place. But this is kind of a unique self-imposed punishment, which I'll give him credit. At least they tried to do something a little different with one of them and didn't just say he went off to some water planet to swim for the rest of his life or something.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
But the makeup is completely not even. You can't even justify it with the amount of money that they spent.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Our next bracket is annoying kids who can't act versus Basil, the horrific CGI rodent.
I gotta go with Greg. Sorry, I keep trying to.
No, you're Greg's good. You're
turn.
good.
I mean, what does it matter?
I'm gonna go with the acting. I'm just fucking sick of seeing really shit child actors, and they pop up a lot in Disney. Like that kid who played Peter Pan in Peter Pan and Wendy. Then there was the Indiana Jones 5 had this horrible wee child actor who played knockoff Shorty. And there's been other ones that I've since forgotten, but I'm just so sick of seeing crap child actors, because you can find good child actors. They exist if you look for them. And these two kids, they make Jake Lloyd from episode 1 look good. They were absolutely dreadful. Now, it's not their fault. This is Disney's fault. Okay. These kids should have had an acting coach there who, at least got them through the scenes. Every time these kids open their mouths, it breaks immersion. I mean, not that there's any immersion anyway, but if there was, these kids would shatter it. They're terrible. Well, so I got to go with the kids.
It would have been fine if they had been bad actors, but they just needed them because they were twins. These two aren't even twins.
Well, they're twins. They're fraternal twins.
So you got fraternal twins, and they suck at acting. You didn't nail either of the things that you needed for these kids.
That's true, yeah. Because if they're not identical twins, then you open up the entire, acting world of California to find the right two kids, and this is the best they came up with. Oh, well. So are we going kids or because DarkHour? What about Basil?
Well, yeah, I was going to say the same thing about them being fraternal twins. So no sense in retreading that. But yeah, I agree. I actually the gopher kind of made me laugh because all I could think of the whole time was the scene from Caddyshack.
That's fair.
That's all I could think of. So I actually kind of enjoyed him in my weird, morbid, twisted, killing myself watching this show way.
All right, a little love for the gopher. That's nice. Okay. All right, and then we have Smilo Ren versus Amandla's rap dance clap back at the critics.
I gotta go with the clapback because we haven't seen the reveal. Although there have been some leaks, and you don't even need the leaks. You knew in episode 2 who this was going to be. But I'm gonna go cringe dancing for now.
Pimped versus pimped.
Yeah. That's great. Well, look, I'm actually quite happy about this. Is the one thing I really like about the show is Kylo Rentboy, because I love the fact that he's wearing a gimp mask, and I love that it's just like, yeah, shout your kink, don't be ashamed of it, own it.
Yeah, no kink shaming.
I fully support that. But Stanberg's ridiculous, badly made, like the half-assed thrown together at the last minute art school project music video with absolutely garbage lyrics, garbage. I wouldn't even call it a melody. Terrible rapping. Do you know what the rhythm of her rap is? The rhythm is something like dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
It's. You do understand there's such a thing as you can vary the rhythm. It doesn't need to be dun dun. It's so terrible musically. If you were to go through the different musical elements, but it's cringe and it's kind of funny. And there's guys out there who'll that's a wank they can get behind. But basically, it's absolutely terrible.
Not
so. I'm definitely.
It's the rap rhythm of the 1980s, where it's like at that tempo of dum ba da da ba da ba da ba da ba, like that kind of tempo.
It's so bad.
Despot almost hit it on the head. If you watch this with no sound, it's almost bearable because of her looking pretty good. And I'm really curious as to how many retakes they had to do, because that top was working double time in some of those in some of that. But I mean, it's just hands down. This villain, we haven't seen enough of this villain outside of the really stupid lines from the first episode about how steel doesn't work on Jedi, even though we saw it at the beginning of the episode. So I can't really pass judgment on it yet because I don't know shit about him other than that he has a weird mask.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like how you assumed it's pronouns, but that's fine.
You guys all edit your own videos, right?
I have someone help me, but I do my own edit. We both edit it. Yeah.
So she proudly proclaimed that video took 72 hours to make. Would it take any of you 72 hours to edit that and make it, film it, edit it, put it out, the whole bit?
Well, I mean, maybe she was also referring to writing and recording the music.
Yeah, the whole process from start to finish.
Well, I mean, so not too bad for 72 hours, but yeah, not the best, so she definitely wins this round, I think. All
right. Okay, Anakin blew up the Death Star versus, and this is an underrated one. I think there hasn't been enough discourse about this horrific CGI lesbian elder. I think there hasn't been enough talk about it. The fact that the eyes are crossed, that the face wouldn't quite map onto the thing, so it wasn't coming at the right angles. So there's been a lack of discourse around this, I think. But that's got hard competition against Anakin blew up the Death Star.
I'm going to go, just for the novelty of it, I'm going with Dog Grandma. And also what adds to that for me is that she's just one of many, many, many examples of how the people that wrote this show are such great examples of idiots trying to write smart people, or idiots trying to write profound or mystical people, because they wrote her like everybody defers to this grandma dog, and her speech is, they'll either pass or they'll fail. And they're like, oh my God, that's the most profound thing I've ever heard. That's incredible. Wow, your wisdom is so timeless. That's why I'm going with her.
Yeah, fair enough.
It wasn't until you actually said the line that she said that it reminded me she was even in the show, though. Like, I completely forgot. I blocked this character out completely.
I'm going to go with Yoda's grandma, because it's just so obvious that the lesbian Bene Gesserit are just a Bene Gesserit knockoff. And
lesbian Gesserit, that's good.
Yeah, the lesbian Bene Gesserit. And this thing, this Yoda's grandma thing, that's supposed to be the Reverend Mother. And so it's just such an obvious knockoff, and I'm gonna go with her. Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. I'm glad that she's getting both love and hate at the same time. So I'm glad about that. Okay, I think that's all our brackets. No. Okay, so Ki Adi Mundi, who looks like Bill Bailey with a headpiece on. It looks like something out of like 1970s Doctor Who, and the canon's all wrong. Versus the on-screen death, or like fizzle out nothing death of the Wookiee. And a little side note here, I like it how if you complain about fire in space, then all the Star Wars sycophants will say you're taking it too seriously. It's just a fantasy show. But if you start to question something about canon, then they will give you a pedantic, encyclopedic lecture about the specifications of everything. So a bit of hypocrisy there. So, Greg.
Well, this is a tough one because they had a Jedi Wookiee, which is such a cool concept, and then they were like, "And we're not going to use it at all." But I got to go with Conehead, Penis Head there, because it's another example of how they don't know how to write a show that doesn't reference the original 6. They can't write a show without going, remember when we were good? You guys remember that? Remember when you liked our stuff? We're just going to keep referencing that over and over again. And I don't even care about the canon. Like, I'm not even into it enough to care about that or notice it. I just hate the fact that I could tell that he was only there so that I would go, oh, I remember that guy. That's the only reason he's there.
That's the only reason. Yeah.
Yeah, he's an annoying Mambry, a cage angle, the kind of thing that Inside Out 2 was making fun of with the character of nostalgia. But I would have to go with the Wookiee. It's such an appalling, dumb example of breaking the Chekhov's gun principle. And you could almost use it as an instructive lesson in a script writing class. Like, okay, today we're going to learn about Chekhov's gun, and here's the Wookiee from the Acolyte, and here's why Leslie Headland, fucked that up and what she should have done. I'm going to go with the Wookiee. It's just so dumb to introduce this really cool concept and then just do nothing with it. It was such a letdown because that was the one thing I was kind of half interested in saying, well, Jedi Wookiee, let's see how they do with that. Whereas Penis Head, I mean, the show looks so terrible. It looks so shit that he basically just blends right in because this entire show looks awful. From start, everything is awful. I mean, look at their clothes. They're so clean. Those clothes were manufactured. Those are out of they took the plastic off them right before they started filming. Yeah. They look perfect, right? They don't look like Jedi robes. It's fucking awful. It does not matter what aspect of filmmaking you point out. It's done wrong. The Acolyte is, I can't even.
He literally can't even. All right, DarkHour, which one are you choosing?
Oh man, this one's tough because I do feel like the Wookiee is such a wasted opportunity. But at the same time, when you have hundreds of millions of dollars at your disposal and you can't even have an intern Google when this guy was supposed to exist in the timeline, I got to go with Ki-Adi Mundi because partially because he's one of my favorite extended characters. So like it pisses me off on like my like younger self on like a guttural level.
All right. Well, that takes us through our initial brackets, and then we get to go into the which I believe would be the quarterfinals. Okay, so let me bring this. I think I want to try and share this now. Okay, which looks like this. Okay, I'm going to make that even slightly larger. That's probably as big as I can get it. Okay, so your first quarterfinal is between Rocks on Fire or Stone Building on Fire versus Yes.
She's a powerful leader.
It's Rocks. It's Rocks. Because the actors can be dumb. If they just do their job, that's fine. But that fire, that's the writers, and that they need to know better. And it's that's a root cause of why this show sucks so much. They just don't care. It's the fire for sure.
Fire. Oh yeah, it's the fire. It's the fire.
Really?
Yeah, and it's definitely going to get brought back in because they actually have to explain how all of them died at some point. They have to.
It's the Jedi's fault for sure.
Yeah, I know. We're going to be going back to this scene at some point.
The fire was incidental. They were dead before the fire. The Jedi killed them.
Coruscant PD is to blame for sure.
Well, I'm surprised that Yaz Yaz wouldn't make it further. And this leads us to lesbian space witches versus Facebeard.
Oh, witches. The witch is gonna win it. God, that
Witches
thing
is at minimum taking this side.
It was the cringiest few minutes of television I have seen. I can't remember the last time I saw something that was so ridiculous.
All right. All right. So that's one heck of a semifinal there. Okay, annoying kid actors versus Amandala's rap.
This one is tough. Do you know what? Because they're kids, I'll give them a pass.
Oh,
Amandla should know better, so I'll give her this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree
Greg?
with that exact sentiment.
Okay.
Oh, see, I'm opposite. I'm losing this one, but no, Ejecta's right there because she's tertiary or secondary to the show. The show is still bad, and the surrounding drama makes it juicier. But still, the show is crap.
I think I'm starting to think that this is going to end up being the thing that people remember the most from this show is this music video, though. So I have a feeling it's going to be more impactful in the long run.
All right. Well, one more quarterfinal. It's Yoda's mom versus Kiadi Mundi's retcon.
Penis head versus sack face.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, just combine them into one really.
No.
We're gonna lose the next round anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
which
go
one?
with scrotum face.
Okay. Yeah. Greg, which one are you going with?
Reverend Mother scrotum face.
He's writing these down as we go.
Yeah. These are good bits.
I'm going with Mr. Memberberries, Mr. Key Jangle. That's gotta be me.
Okay. DarkHour, up to you.
Ooh. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Kiadi Mundi as well. I'm still as the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm just angry about that whole sequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I have to go with him too. I'm glad that the scrotum Reverend Mother had a good look in.
She was so forgettable for me that I can't realistically have her move on.
But I mean,
Okay,
it just goes to prove Despot's point that like by the end of the series, maybe she'll come back by the end of the series. But if she doesn't, it's just one more example of that Chekhov's gun thing that like they brought this like everybody else is humanoid. And then you've got this random, terrible CGI that they all look to for wisdom, and then she's never heard from again. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
some of the worst writing imaginable. I disagree with you. I don't even think high schoolers would do that. Like this, because high schoolers and college students don't make these kind of mistakes because they're just learning about them, so they think they're really cool because they try to like subvert them or whatever. This is the kind of thing only a self-important, narcissistic psychopath could do because they think that they're above the rules of writing.
Yeah. All right, so Temple on Fire versus the Power of One, the Power of Two, the Power of Many.
That is kind of tough. I still have to say Lesbian Space Witches because when I was writing about this, I described this as hippie cringe. It's the kind of thing that sort of boomer kids would have thought was cool in the early 70s. I mean, it's 50 fucking years out. Like 50 years ago, this would have been kind of cringy and embarrassing, right? But somehow Leslie Headland thinks it's cool. It's it's definitely the Lesbian Space Witches. I could go on for an hour about how bad this fucking thing is, and we haven't even touched on the fact that this is Star Wars now. Star Wars is Lesbian Space Witches now, and the fact that they're so unoriginal because they really are just a Bene Gesserit knockoff with a little bit of force power thrown in. They're so fucking lazy. It's awful. And the cringe, my God.
Well,
Greg, which way do you turn?
Oh, it's obviously the witches. I mean, it's like the directing. It's not even the writing. It was like I'm imagining I'm gonna have a whole bit on this because the director had to have said like some of this shit. Like, can anybody do an impression of what Xena Warrior Princess would sound like if somebody told a really funny joke and somebody was like, and he was like, yes, keep that. Can you look like you have a vibrator in while you're sewing, while you're embroidering the sky? Yes, that's excellent. I love that. Like there was so much going on.
I have one thing I'll save it for the final, but it's one thing that bothered me that I don't think enough people have mentioned, but I'll save it for the final.
Okay. Not enough lesbian witches?
No. It's about specifically like some of the wording and how on the nose it is.
Okay, well, this is an interesting one. Kia di Mundi, out of law with a penis head and a ridiculous beard, versus.
In fairness, he always
rap.
had a penis head and a ridiculous beard. That's not. They didn't change that. That's
true.
That's accurate.
You're right. So Amandala's rap versus law breaking.
I'm gonna say the Master Penis Head, because first of all, Amandala's rap is going to win the Worst of Folk Award next year for worst music video and probably worst song as well.
That's exciting.
So that thing's got 2 awards, probably already in the bag for next year. I can't see the subs voting any other way. So she'll get some awards for that music video. But it's the clothes for me. It's just those clothes are so pristine. I can't. The more I think about it, the more I hate it. It's just these bleached white, brand new clothes straight out of the plastic bag. It's just, it gets worse the more I think about it. So it's gonna be him.
All right.
Yeah, it's him. And like I said, it's
really?
I didn't know who the guy was, so I can't claim like I care about the lore. It's just it's what it represents, that all they know how to do is just go, remember? Don't you know that this is a Star Wars? Look, there's lightsabers. Aren't you into that? Like, I hate that sentiment so much.
So DarkHour, are you a Amandala or you a Kiari Mundi?
No, I was gonna say Amandala, but it's gonna lose either way. But I do agree with what you guys are saying, both are different points. It's just the overall laziness of everything involved, from the writing, as Greg was saying, and like I said, that they didn't even bother to check. No, anybody could check, and they didn't bother to do that. It doesn't matter because we know what's going to win this last round. So,
well, I was kind of hoping for a Amandala rap song versus lesbian space witch song. I think that would have been an incredible final.
That would have been tough.
Yeah.
I mean, Amanda should be proud though. She got into the semifinals. That's pretty good.
Yeah, the 11th hour. So I'll give her credit for that. All right, so I think we know who the winner is. The lesbian space witches. Is it even remotely a contest?
It's got to be the lesbian space witches.
That was worse than the synchronized quartet assassination Caesar.
Yeah, I think so.
Honestly, that would have been a better debate. This.
While we're here, I mean, that surely this has taken the place of, I think we voted on worst Star Wars moment, and I believed it was it Ahsoka chopping up spaceships in space?
I think it was. Yeah, I think that just pipped fat woman rapper with the bananas.
Yeah. This takes it.
Yeah.
This is now the worst moment in Star Wars. For me, this is the worst Disney Star Wars moment, the lesbian witches. Peak
let's
Disney
go through
Star
it.
Wars.
Let's go through it. So, Greg, Blizzo or lesbian space witch song?
Oh, it's still the community theater actors embroidering the sky for sure. I mean, it's just it's just sheer volume of cringe.
It's lesbian dance theory in Star Wars.
Yeah, that's hard to beat. But Lizzo is a crap. She's a body positivity figure who looks ridiculous with a fat body and spandex playing the flute, who's just failed upwards, defying gravity in every sense, especially physically, to end up like as a farcical pop culture figure who appears in Star Wars wearing a ridiculous costume with Jack Black playing alongside her, with Yoda being thrown into her lap. Come on.
Yeah, Jack Black has gotten to the point where he's just taking whatever they throw his way.
Yeah.
So that's his career now.
It's at least a conversation between those two.
I do think that at least the one solace we can take from all of that is that I think she is getting James Cordened. She's slowly losing favor with everyone because it's been revealed that she's kind of a dick behind scenes. So she's gonna her and James are gonna hang out and wish they had been nicer to people off camera as well as on.
Also, the body positive movement is in its death throes. That thing won't last like the year.
As are some of its members.
Yeah, most of the people that are part of it are dying off. That's why. So.
A lot of the big TikTokers or wherever these body positive
big TikTokers. I see what you did there.
Yeah. Apparently, a lot of them are now they've gotten sick, and I knew this would happen. I made a body positivity analysis video a couple of years ago, and in it, I predicted that the movement would end when all of the influencers just got sick, and that's exactly what has happened. They've gotten sick, and they've decided to go on weight loss journeys, and
it was a heavy burden for them.
It was a heavy burden,
always up
the
against
I mean,
it.
the movement just collapsed under its own weight.
Yeah. They were always up against it because on TikTok with that appalling aspect ratio that you got to have your videos in, they were always up against it with
Can't
that.
fit it all in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that solves that conundrum
But
about the worst
just
moments.
real quick, so one thing I about the lesbian space, which is now technically it's not part of their dance, it's that whole like argument they have, and like, you know, the on the nose nature of they want our children, they don't want us to have children, they don't want us to give our life, like show our lifestyle to children. That is something I don't think enough people mentioned, and to me it was clearly taking just everything that they could from recent movements, whether it be when, you know, the gay adoption stuff from a few years back, or the continuous argument about whether or not like transgender should be going into like elementary schools and reading to kids and all this stuff. It was just so on the nose that I couldn't imagine that there was any type of subtlety in anyone's brain in that writing room, because they didn't even try to hide it.
Yeah. Well, I've been watching the fourth season of The Boys, and I've been a little taken aback by the vehemence of the criticism from a lot of critics, saying, you know, this is like seriously downhill, and they've exposed themselves. They've ripped away the curtain to show their politics. I don't know. I think it's fine. I'm enjoying the show simply because the fundamentals of the show are so good that even if it's compromised slightly, even if the quality dips, even if there's a little bit of rigmarole, even if it's got the same old problems of the secondary characters you don't care about that much get too much screen time, even despite all of that, this is still a kick-ass, incredible show because I like these characters. I like Butcher, and I like Homelander, mainly because they're Antipodean actors. But the premise is still funny and engaging, and the characterization is still great. So even if it's a little off its game and it's lost a step, it's still a great series. I just wonder if there's a little bit too many people out there who think that you know, they've tipped their hand and they've showed that they're progressive all along, and you know, they're making right-wing people look silly. So I think some people have just got their panties in a little bit of a wad about that. Because they feel that like it's laughing and mocking at them too much, and it's a little bit out of sync or balanced and trying to be fair and even-handed. It was never fair and even-handed. It would take the piss out of modern popular culture. But yeah, I think they're taking a little too seriously, and that's where I'm at with this show, because I think the excesses in crazy stuff on one particular site, I think merits, or at least is better fodder, in my view, for this kind of breaking down and satirizing. So that's where I'm at, but you guys might have different views.
Well, I haven't watched season 3 or 4. I heard 3 was really graphic and just kind of downright gross. And I was like,
yeah, but in an awesome way. I loved it. It was great fun.
And I've heard that also. And I don't know, for some reason, it just, I just wasn't feeling it at one point. And I just never really got, and you know how it is with shows, like you just kind of put them off for a while. You're like, I'll come back to that. And you just never do. So I haven't really picked it back up, but the first 2 seasons I felt were, I can't, you know, like I said, I haven't watched a lot of reviews because I just don't care that much about the show anymore. But the first 2 seasons were very clearly, they had a very liberal bent to them. I mean, like it was making fun of religious nationalism, you know, the fact that they worship Homelander, and that, like, people talk about, like, you know, they've combined the nationalism of Homelander, who literally wears an American flag suit, with Christianity. The pastor is a superhero, stretchy guy. Like, you know, they were really close to poking at toxic masculinity with Butcher, and like there were a lot of what you would think of as like liberal ideas, or they're poking at conservative ideas or whatever. Like, so I think that was always pretty obvious to anyone who was paying attention. The only thing that I would maybe guess is that in the last season, they just haven't done it as skillfully or subtly, or maybe just the show isn't as fun. And so maybe that's what people are kind of seeing, is like the first 2 seasons were cool. They were kick-ass. They were fun. They were awesome. So like when Vought is a stand-in for corporate America and how it's so horrible and destroying and it exploits people and whatever, you could sort of look past that symbolism because you're like, yeah, this is badass. And maybe what's happening now is the writing quality or the fun isn't quite there anymore. And so you're seeing those themes more. That's my only guess, because anybody who says it was never this bad, I just have to wonder what show you were watching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I just think the fundamentals of it are really great. And I like the gore and the silly scenes and the deliberately visceral and repellent stuff. It's great. There's one, like, I don't even want to describe some of the scenes because they're so tawdry, but in a brilliant way. I always get 2 or 3 genuine laughs out of each episode, so I'm entertained. So I don't have a problem.
Yeah.
Someone said in the chat, and I think it was pretty accurate. I don't know if you could find it, but it was that the visceral reaction seems to be coming mostly from the United States, and I think that is true. I don't think it's as being as not well received elsewhere. But anybody who knows anything about Garth Ennis, the guy who wrote the book, would never have believed that this was like championing conservatism, because that's not who he is. So I don't know if that was just ignorance of the actual source material and people were misreading a lot of stuff. And I do agree with you that there's probably a novelty that's wearing off now. It's, you can only go so far with the shock factor of things, and then eventually it people numb to it. And I think we might be seeing some of that as well.
Well, here's my perspective. Like, my kind of wheelhouse is someone who's generally moderate, centrist, fundamentally liberal on most issues, but who gets exasperated by the flaky, strident, and prissy excesses of liberalism. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I don't think it's asking too much for people on the other side to kind of do like the flip side of that, where you can be right-wing, center-right, but also be exasperated by the strident and more ridiculous and aggressive fringe aspects of the right. And that's those latter things which I think are getting satirized and broken down. So I don't know. I think that's not asking too much.
No, have you guys? Yes. I know somebody in the chat was asking about it. Have you guys seen Mr. Bertram?
No, I saw that comment a few times.
I'm probably going to do a drive-by review on that. I have these little mini segments in my videos called drive-by reviews that I'm trying to make a thing, and it's where I will take 10 minutes to review something. My next one is going to be a really bad stand-up special by Brendan Schaub called The Gringo Pappy. So I would maybe do one for Mr. Beecham, because if I did a mainline video, it wouldn't do well, but I could do a little drive-by on it, but it looks fucking terrible. Have you seen it, Greg?
I only saw the first episode, and I haven't been able to bring myself to watch the second. I posted about it, and people are like, oh yeah, the first episode is terrible, and it really is the worst, and it gets a little better as it goes. And I just think, like, even a little better wouldn't be anything. But I think that's what Echo's talking, like, it represents to me what Echo's talking about. Like, that Lady Ballers, like, they're both by the Daily Wire, and it just feels like in Mr. Bertram, it's a school teacher, and they have like a new DEI officer, and I don't even think that he is what a conservative person thinks a caricature of a leftist is. The way I would describe this character is what a leftist thinks a caricature of a conservative would think a caricature of a leftist is. Like, it's the most insane character you've ever. It's so bad. It's like not even funny. You're not making fun. It feels like you're punching down.
I've heard it described as the anti-Velma. Would you go that far?
I would. Yeah. It's boring, which is the worst insult that I can give to any show. Like, it's not even like The Boys, where you're like, okay, I get it. You're the person that made this does not like conservatives, but this show is great. I don't care. I'm just gonna watch it. Like, yeah, that's a guy that runs super speed, ran through a gal and destroyed her body. Like, only her hands were left. That's crazy. I want to watch this show. Bertram was slow. It was awful. Adam Carolla's voice acting, he's trying to do a crotchety old man, and it sounds terrible. It's mean-spirited feeling. It just, yeah, it was very bad. I need to go watch. I got to watch the rest of them, but I watched one episode, and I can't even make myself watch it for like a review. It's so terrible.
Mention that in the review. Like, just be honest and say, look, this was so bad. I struggled to force myself to watch it for the sake of a video.
Yeah. And like Lady Ballers, I've heard is, a similar thing. And I think
that thing looks fucking awful.
I think what the issue with a lot of these is that, and Echo's right. Like you can get it on the left or right. You can get into these weeds where you have so little self-awareness and so little, like a little, especially with comedy, you need some self-deprecation. And from what I've seen with Lady Ballers, they didn't have any kind of self-awareness about them. They just wanted to poke at the other folks. You know, the neighbor, Matt Walsh plays the neighbor, and he's a hippie guy. And they think, I guarantee they thought that was hilarious. And it's like, I mean, maybe for a minute or two, but by the end of the movie, I'm sure I'm going to be bored by your caricature representation of what you think a hippie is. And it gets boring to see you bashing on them and not even poking at yourself a little bit. Like, I don't know.
I mean, in The Boys season 4, one of the main new characters called Firecracker, it's literally like a parody of Marjorie Taylor Greene. So it's going for the fringes. It's going for the absurd. Like it's a comedy show, and comedy thrives on absurdity. So if you're a bit touchy and prickly about the idea that, you know, they're going after me or my identity or this side, not really. They're going after absurd fringe elements, which is the source and the fuel for comedy.
Yeah.
But while we're talking about politics, I just want to do the little bit at the end where Echo weighs in with a little bit of analysis on US politics.
The bit toward the end where Echo weighs in with insight and analysis of U.S. politics.
So I'll try and keep it quick. But here's a concept for you all. It's not going to be Armageddon in 2024 and onwards.
We're going to elect Macho Camacho pretty soon.
Well, here's a thought I had. And it's kind of an odd take, but I'm warming to it, which is a second Trump term might actually be kind of boring. And here's my reasoning. Every new president who comes in the last 30 years at least, they're always accompanied by the trifecta. They always come in with the Senate and the House. So in order to get legislation and to make your impact, you have to come in with the trifecta. So George W. Bush, Obama, Clinton before them, and then Trump, and then Biden. They always come in with that. It's not a kind of unwritten rule. It's just the way that the wave kind of goes. The Senate's kind of dodgy, probably go Republican, but the House is kind of even Steven in the polls. But I think the Democrats have, for one reason or another, a far better ground game than the Republicans do. And so I think through my analysis, it's probably like a 75% chance, 66, 75% chance that the Democrats will win the House, which means nothing really dramatic is going to happen because right from the get-go, there won't be, the Affordable Care Act won't go. There's not going to be a border wall. So, and I don't think the Supreme Court's really going to change. That's already kind of stuck. So even when it comes to like major tax policy, that kind of thing, if you have like a block from day one, then there's not really much you can do. So, of course, the president has executive action that he can do, but that's also relatively constrained and limited, even if he's trying to shift that as much as he can. So I think if you're someone who loves Donald Trump, and if you're someone who hates Donald Trump, and you're going through various states of conniptions and paranoia about the whole thing, odds on, even if he gets elected, it's actually going to be, I think, far more boring and sedate and less consequential than everyone thinks it's going to be.
I agree with you, and I think that was one of the cool things that they built into our form of government was this kind of thing was actually designed to happen so that you couldn't just get a small group of people and run away with whatever their ideas were. So it made it much more difficult to make lasting changes. So I'm actually kind of excited that it proves that if it does end up being boring, it sort of proves that was a very good foresight by the people that designed it. Although I'm very interested to see how things go after this debate. Thursday night, I think, it's going to be very interesting because on the one hand, if Joe Biden is able to speak full sentences, it doesn't even matter if his answers are good or his policy is whatever. If he doesn't collapse on stage or doesn't get confused and pee himself or something, then he will have cleared the bar that has been set for him at this point. But then also there's the chance that he really embarrasses himself and basically Trump and then by extension the Republican Party kind of sweep it because I think that Biden and his party by extension will kind of crumble if he embarrasses himself that badly and he's like physically, mentally shows himself to be unfit. and all of these people have been backing him, that's really going to that's going to be disastrous to the party as a whole, that they've kind of been seen to have been propping him up like that. But I think that he'll pull it together. He's a lifelong politician, and I think he'll just he'll turn it on and he'll say things into the camera. He'll sound like he's coherent, and I don't think that any of his answers are going to be like incredible, but he will do better than he is expected to, and that will be seen as a win.
Well, there's several things there. One is, if you go back to watch the State of the Union back in January or early March, he was fine. He was up there for 90 minutes. He did okay. I cannot understand why they don't get a voice coach into that guy. He sounds like a whispery, light drawl. And if you just get some voice coaches and actor and theater people to just work on getting that voice deeper, can't figure it out. It's very strange. It's obvious stuff. But there's a fundamental incoherence. If you're trying to say that Donald Trump is impermissible, that he's a renegade, that he's crazy, that he betrayed the country, then stick to that narrative. But if you're bringing him up on stage next to you and you're legitimizing him, then you make your entire narrative incoherent. So it's a strange one for me. But I'm not going to be watching it because I just think it's too painful to watch those two people, and I just don't want to see either of them. It's going to be too awkward. So I'll be like most people and just like look online to see what the general gist was. But yes, it's not great.
Yeah, I'm going to be finishing up Acolyte video, so I won't be able to watch it live, but I'll watch it Friday night, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. I think that's the only one until the election. They're just doing the one.
All right. Well, we've got a couple of super chats to go through. So Foster for $9.99 here. Gen Z here. I'm so sorry. However, not retarded, thankfully. Not even my most brain-rotted peers are watching The Acolyte, and usually they'll consume anything. Disney and woke killed all my heroes. Y'all keep me sane. Well, I appreciate that, Foster. We're trying to work on our younger demographics a little bit, so I'm glad that you're there. Dear old Joshua. Thoughts on Nosferatu trailer? Looks good to me. Well, it's David Eggers, and I checked out the trailer, and it's not sharply pure horror. And it's got a little bit of kind of self-awareness, kind of humor to it as well, which I don't quite like the look of. So I like Dave Eggers, but I don't think this is going to be the goods, and I kind of trust my instincts on this by now. But I think it'd be a fun watch. And anyone else seen the trailer?
I have not.
No.
I avoid trailers because I don't do any kind of like reactions to them, and I try to not form an opinion before I see something for real. So
fair enough. Graph Web for another $2 here. In the name of all that is holy, # cancel Disney Plus. Well, let's get that. Let's get
it's
that,
happening.
The Acolyte is an advertisement for why you should cancel Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And I think this is the last one here. No, we went from M8566. Hello, $5. We went from intergalactic war with entire planets struggling for survival to lesbian space witches showing the patriarchy they don't need no man. Yeah, we went from spectacle to identity and empowerment. What a shit show. And lastly here, Ejector Curtin, who's been a lively firework in the chat there. Show us your tight denim shorts, rapper. Well, I promised him that I would squeeze my way into some tight denim shorts for today's broadcast. But you'll never know if I'm wearing them or not. So I'll leave that up to your imagination.
It's winter where he is. You gotta.
That's correct, yeah. Anyway, so that's about it for today. I think we've covered everything in the world of popular culture. So, Greg, what you got cooking? What can you tell the folks?
Tomorrow I've got a recap of the second weekend of Inside Out, which we already kind of covered most of it. Thanks for spoiling all of that. And then more Acolyte this week. I think episode 4 and 5 recap, and just as many jokes as I can make, because that's all that's interesting. The show itself is not even really worth talking about. It's just the jokes that we can make on its dying corpse.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that the Acolyte is like a decapitated small baby child that's being trundled through the middle of the village?
One could say that. That was
yeah. Anyway, Despot, what's going on?
I'm currently working on a near 2-hour video about how DEI has ruined modern entertainment, which will be up on Monday.
Oof.
All right, we'll keep a lookout for that. And DarkHour, when are you going to get me on Two House? That's the first question. And second, what you got going?
I think I have you scheduled for October. So
okay.
And I'm trying to work something out with Greg, but he's got like all sorts of restrictions and stuff apparently.
Yeah, all these kids. I think. I believe.
By the way, how did you get on the open bar 100th episode special, and none of us did.
I don't know. Drinker likes me. I don't know. I don't know why he likes me. He started my like, if you could even call this a career. I don't really think it is, but he started it. So I don't know. But that was chaos. That was
looked like it.
Was honestly, you guys didn't miss much because you got to be on, say like 3 things, and like, see you later, guys. Like it was like it's like a passing by. But as for what I have going on, 2 hoes, as you mentioned, we actually have a really cool one. So I won't be in the state this upcoming week, but the following week we have David Worth, who directed Kickboxer, several other movies, and he was also involved with Bloodsport. He's worked with like Bruce Campbell. He's going to be on for an interview. He was actually in the chat for my when we did Kickboxer.
Whoa,
that was pretty
great.
Cool. And we have like a bunch of the schedule is over on our repost channel, which I'm still trying to get the ball rolling on that one, but we got a bunch of bangers for the rest of the year. Part 2 of my Acolyte video. I was only going to do 1, but everyone loved the first one so much that I'm just going to do a second one and possibly a third one. And hopefully that pushes me above the 5,000 marker, because I'm inching closer to it. I'm at like 40, almost 4,900 subscribers now. So
nice one.
Anybody out there who's watching who hasn't subscribed to me yet, please do, because it'll just get me that much closer.
Nice. Cool. All right. Well, that just about does it for today. So it just remains me to thank Greg Owen, Despot of Antrim, and DarkHour. So Kakiti Ano, Haidera, and we'll see you next time. So goodbye, YouTube.